I started meditating about 30 years ago. I learned my first meditation techniques from my first martial arts teacher. So the single-pointed mind meditation technique is a very powerful concentration technique for meditation. And it involves concentrating on particular chakras. And the chakras are energy centers in our energy body. Not only do you develop concentration and the ability to hold your mind still, once you become adept at this particular meditation technique on the chakras, you can raise the Kundalini energy.
Greetings, my friends, and welcome back to day 27 of the 30 days to raise your frequency.
Time, enlightenment goes silent for us.
I hope you're having a good day out there today. It is Saturday, isn't it? Hard to keep track of what day it is anymore. But nonetheless, we are here to meditate and to talk about meditation. How to be a good meditator, how to be successful in your meditation practice, and to answer any questions that you might have about all of that. You know, meditation is such a varied subject with such a wide variety of permutations and possibilities, isn't it? And if you're new to meditation, it can seem somewhat overwhelming to the newcomer. And this is exactly why I started the group. The group Meditation and Mindfulness was originally called 30 Days. It was originally called 30-Day Meditation Challenge because from my experience, I feel it's very important to meditate every day for reasons that, even if you don't want to, for reasons that, like any skill or talent, or not talent, but any skill or art that you pursue, if you don't have a daily, disciplined approach to your practice, we tend to let ourselves off the hook way too easily, right? And, you know, we all are guilty of this from time to time. We know we got something we need to do, but we procrastinate, we put it off. We say, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow, and then we never do. This seems just somewhat part of most human nature, is to be a procrastinator. So, originally, I sought to gather friends and family, form a 30-day meditation challenge group on Facebook, and launched it back in the summer. This is July of 2016. Gosh, almost 4 years ago now. And it was great. It was successful. It was really nice to see people interested in meditation. And let me get some more light on the subject here. There we go, a little fill light over there. And it was very fun. It was cool to see people taking an interest in meditation who have never meditated before, and people who had meditated before learn a new technique, which is the same technique that I'll be bringing you today, which I call the 5 steps to stillness. Stillness is a very important topic when it comes to meditation. What is it? And, you know, if you know me, you know I like to break down concepts. I like to explain things to the nth degree because I feel it's important for people to understand what's going on here, what's the purpose in meditation, and or why do we meditate. So, what is stillness? The aspect of ourselves that we are seeking to still is the active mind. The mind's activity is not totally our doing. We are, by our sheer nature, very sensitive beings. And I can prove this by the fact that you know that we are mostly made of water. Now, water is an interesting element in that it takes the shape of the container that it's put in, right? Your mind is very much like water. And water also has a very interesting property in that if you've ever studied the works of Dr. Masaru Emoto, a Japanese scientist who was researching water and how water can be a recording device, if you will. Water can be imprinted upon. Water can be programmed. And he set out a series of experiments to demonstrate this, to prove this. And what he would do is he would take, and I'm not remembering exactly the process, but something similar to this. He would take a canister of water and he would put a label on it. And the label would be something either positive or something negative. Let's say the word love, or the word something like a compliment, like you look great, for example. And then he would have other containers that would say, hate, or you look horrible, or something like that. And this was the first set of experiments. And then he would flash freeze the water. And when you freeze water, it creates crystals, it creates geometries, it creates geometric patterns that you can observe for symmetry. You can observe the geometric patterns for their shape. And as we know, if you've been listening in, shape translates into frequency. So he observed that the water containers that were labeled with positive, things like love, things like you are beautiful, or whatever kind of a positive thing you could say in a word format, that those frozen ice crystals would be very beautiful. They would be very symmetrical. They would be geometrically aesthetic. You could look at them and say, oh, that's a beautiful crystal. And then the containers that had words such as hate or you look terrible or whatever kind of a negative wording, and those ice crystals, those geometric shapes were very non-aesthetic. They were very distorted and you could say ugly. So it was a very interesting experiment. Then he experimented with music, and he exposed these containers of water to different types of music. Now, if you know anything about music, you know that music is all about frequency. Music is all about geometry. And the different types of music that we expose ourselves to influences us, programs us. And so he would expose the certain types of certain containers of water to beautiful classical music of the greats, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. And he would also expose other containers of water to like very let's say dissonant, dark forms of death metal. You know, the ones that are just like, not my favorite kind of music. And again, the water that was flash frozen, that was exposed to the beautiful classical music of Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, generated very beautiful, symmetrical, intricate, perfect shaped crystals and geometric patterns. And the water that was flash frozen and exposed to the dark death metal, not the good stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of good metal out there. And as a musician, I listen to all genres of music, and there's some awesome metal music out there that's very precise, and but let's look at that crystal, and the crystal was non-symmetrical. It was ugly. It was distorted. So the case in point is that our mind is very similar to water in that it takes on the imprinting of the environmental conditions that we put it in. We're very influenced by our surroundings. And if you have an open mind, even more so. Oh, isn't it good to have an open mind? Well, when we talk about having an open mind, we talk about specifically open to new ideas, not being so stubborn and fixed in thinking we know what is and what isn't for sure, but being open to learning new things. This is what I call beginner's mind, Zen mind, beginner's mind. And so this is a good type of open mind. But if we walk around with our awareness just kind of hanging out, open and exposed to every environmental influence that we encounter, well, that can be problematic because we're sensitive, because we're influenced, and because once we're imprinted, we then are observers and we notice these thoughts, these impressions, this programmed, whether it be a message, whether it be music or what have you. It's not necessarily a good thing to go out and always keep the mind open for external influence. And this is why yesterday I talked about a way to protect your mind, and that's using a mantra. When we recite a mantra, it has many purposes, but one of the lesser known purposes is to use the mantra as a way to protect the mind. And one of the things that I neglected to bring up in yesterday's conversation, and you can check yesterday's video, whether you're watching on YouTube, it would be day 26, or whether you're here in the group, it's probably available a few posts down, the live video from yesterday on day 26. But I was talking about how the mantra does many different things for us, prepares us for meditation, stimulates energy within the subtle body and the nadis, the channels. It also helps us to focus on the sound, not only feel the sound, but listen to the sound as a focus device. But another great way to utilize the mantra in a practical way is to replace the mantra, or to replace unwanted thoughts with a mantra. So let's say we're driving down the road, and all of a sudden we start to think about a situation or a person, or where we start to think about an interaction that may have been negative, and we start to go into this downward spiral of judgment. We start to go into this negative downward spiral, and that's a great time to just turn that off with a mantra. So the mantra, you can look at the video yesterday. I went over the mantra Om and the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. These are a great way to replace unwanted thoughts. So let's say you start thinking a thought, or let's say even just on a less intrusive level, you start to replay this song in your head that you don't want. Maybe it's just a pop song that, it's just kind of going on incessantly, and it's kind of draining our energy. It's taking us away. Every thought is like a layer that removes us from being in the moment. Every thought cycle that we get caught up in. So it's like a way of extracting our presence into another area that we start to pay attention to. So let's say this song is annoying. Let's say this song is something that you don't want in your head, or these thoughts are something that you don't want in your head, or you start to go into this negative thought spiral. Well, that's a great way to replace that thought with a mantra. So you could literally, you start to think of something that you don't want to think about, or you start to think about, or you start to repeat this song in your head. Immediately, you just start to recite Om Mani Padme Hum in your head, and it clears away any thoughts that you don't want to think. So this is a great way to have another method or mechanism or tool to remove negative thoughts from your mind, or to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. Because, and people do this constantly with affirmations, and but it seems as if affirmations are more of a way to program your mind. You know, a lot of people wake up and they do their affirmations. They just, before exposing their mind, and I think this is an intelligent thing to do, before exposing their awareness to things such as the internet or Facebook or any type of unknown. It's important to first program your mind with positive affirmations. Now, this is not something that I necessarily do, but I think it's an intelligent thing to do. And the mantra can be a very similar process. Okay, so today we're going to be doing the live guided meditation on the 5 steps to stillness. So the reason why we want to become still is because it's the activity of the mind that is clouding our experience. As human beings, or whatever you want to call us, we are multidimensional. We are multi-layered. We have many different aspects of ourselves that perhaps are that we're unfamiliar with, and simply due to the fact that our awareness, our attention, has become habitually conditioned to be stuck within the senses, to be stuck in our sense organs, which are the eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch. Now, touch is an interesting one. I think touch is part of the nervous system. So that would include, nervous twitches, sensations of the body. Our attention is constantly moving around within the senses, within these sense organs. And the most dominant sense is our eyes. And I talk about this a lot. This is why we use our eyes to get started with meditation. We do an open-eyed meditation to begin with. Because we're so good at using our eyes, it's a very good way to interrupt this activity of the mind. So, a lot of times, people misunderstand, what is it that we're actually becoming still when we meditate, and why do you call it the 5 steps to stillness? Well, stillness is a prerequisite to meditation. If you can't still the activity of your body, if you can't still the activity of your mind, then we'll never be able to transcend them. They'll just keep distracting you over and over again. So what we're seeking to do is make still what is distracting us. And there are many different ways to do this. A lot of people follow the method of simple observation of thought. And to detach themselves from thought, they remain in the position of the observer. And I think that's a great way to do that. It actually is a very advanced way, although it's taught oftentimes as a way for beginners. But I feel that it's difficult for beginners to do that process, to observe and detach from thought, if they're brand new to meditation. If they haven't yet trained their mind through exercises of concentration. So within the method of meditation or concentration that I teach, called the 5 steps to stillness, it begins with 4 steps that are concentration based. And we use a method known as single-pointed mind. And then once we move into the fifth and final step of this meditation, we let go of the concentration, we let go of the focus, and we simply allow for the stillness that we've already built up to then be a merge point for our awareness. what we're doing is we're taking our awareness and we're moving it through various concentration exercises. And then in the fifth step, what we're doing is we're letting that go to the goal of realizing that stillness is already in existence. And there's lots of different ways to look at that. You could look at the fact that the observer, what you and who you really are, your silent witness as consciousness, as awareness, is already still. And that we've sort of just been using a form of consciousness in a concentrated form until we were ready to let that go and allow that to dissolve into consciousness as an already eternally existing form. And you could say that it's like from the form to the formless, because consciousness itself is much like water. And in that, consciousness in its essence does not have a particular form, but it takes a form. It takes the form that we put it in. It takes the form of thoughts. It takes the form of bodies. It takes the form of buildings. It takes the form of creation. Because everything in creation is made from something. And if we look at something on a molecular level, in a microscopic level, in a subatomic particle level, we know that all things are energy. And even you could say that all things are light. And this is where, quantum physics, science, and spirituality have kind of met in the last 20, 30 years. They've come to a point of agreeance, in a way, in that spirituality, if you're familiar with classic spirituality, has always said that everything is light. I mean, light is energy. To me, those words are synonymous, because what is energy? If you look at a bolt of lightning, it emits light, and it's pure energy or pure electricity, or you could call it the element plasma. So this is what all things are created from. Now, in a lot of classical spiritual texts, they talk about the fact that this is a conscious, intelligent light. That light, energy, consciousness, existence, this is the meaning of Sat Chit Ananda, bliss. They're all really one. It's really when the Trinity becomes unity that we transcend duality. And we do this with the process of concentration initially. And we ourselves can experience this transcendence. We ourselves can experience that unity consciousness with this meditation method that I'm about to share with you. And of course it takes some practice. What it is we are taking the obstacle and we are making it not an obstacle anymore. So the obstacle toward this vision, the obstacle toward this realization, the obstacle toward this actuality of unity, because it's not just an idea. It's not just a concept. What really occurs when we were meditating is there's a real union that occurs. And this is the true meaning of the word yoga, is union. Yoga means to join. Now, in Zen, in philosophy, we might say, well, were the two ever really separate? And as we know that there are many different koans, there are many different illusions. But we have to be practical here. We have to say, okay, well, what is your experience of life? Are you in a state of oneness where you experience everything as one? Or are you in a state of separation? Be it illusory or not, we have to assess and analyze our own perspective, our own perception, our own perceptual state. And we do this by just being honest with ourselves. We first need to be perfectly honest with ourselves. This is why I recommend asking yourself the question, why do you meditate? Why would you bother? What's the point? You know? And I think everybody there's a certain category of answers that are fairly popular. On one end of the extreme, you've got people that are interested in God realization, enlightenment, liberation. I would say those are the spiritually minded folks. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people just are interested in just overcoming anxiety, just becoming calm. Perhaps they just want to feel better, overcome anger. Perhaps they, just want to have some peace of mind to overcome that mental chatter. But they're not necessarily interested in the spiritual aspect of it, perhaps yet. And this is great. This is what I love about meditation, is that it really can be, something for everyone. No matter what your reason for meditating is, it can help you. It can give you what you're looking for. But it takes practice, and it takes consistent effort. And so this is why the 30-day meditation challenges are so important. You have to challenge yourself, because guess what? You'll be the first person, I'll be the first person, we'll all be the first people to let ourselves off the hook so easily. And this happens very often. And the reason for this is because, life's okay. It's not horrible living a life without meditation. Now, for some people, it might be horrible. It might be, and it all depends on your own personal spiritual evolution. It all depends on your own personal interest. But for example, we live in a modern society where all the conveniences of instant gratification are available at our fingertips. Quite literally. We've got the world on our phones. We've got all of the abundance we could ever look for materially in our local grocery store. We've got, we got shopping online. We've got, Netflix on demand. We've got YouTube. We've got a number of ways to distract ourselves and keep ourselves entertained. So what's the point of meditating? If meditation is supposed to relieve suffering, well, I'm not suffering, you might say. My life is pretty darn good. And, that's a valid point. Meditation may not be the answer for you. But then there are those of us who have seen beyond, who have lived beyond, who have experienced something beyond the sensorial realm. And that alone makes you yearn for something more, for something deeper, for a spiritual experience, for a connection with the divine, or perhaps to understand life, to understand that there is more to life. And so you can go out and you can read all about it. You can go out, you can find a teacher, you can go out, you can find a guide. And that may or may not be helpful. It depends on where you are within your practice. And on a day like this, it's a Saturday. Now, most people are still perhaps on lockdown. They're still not working. So this just may be like any other day. And it sure kind of feels like any other day that we've been feeling for the last few weeks. Whereas normally weekends kind of feel a little bit different. If you're at all sensitive to energies, you can kind of sense there's a different vibe on the weekends than there is during the weekdays. So, why would you bother meditating on a Saturday? When you can just sit in front of the TV, veg out, consume. Well, the problem with that is that after a certain point, it doesn't quite fulfill us as much as it used to. It doesn't quite give us the same satisfaction that it did before. And in fact, there's a great analogy that my teacher used to always use, and he would say that, let's say you like pie. Let's say you love apple pie. And you get an apple pie, and you have a slice of apple pie. And it's pretty darn good. It makes you feel good for a moment. It satisfies that craving, that hole that we have. It satisfies that desire to feel better, or to just feel some pleasure, right? And then you say, well, gosh, if that one slice of apple pie did it, well, maybe that second slice will give me another satisfaction, because that first slice made you feel good for maybe 5-10 minutes, or maybe just while you're eating it, right? And then, okay, it starts to wear off. Well, then you go for that second slice of pie, and it doesn't quite feel the same as the first, does it? And this is a process known as satiation. Satiation of the senses is a process where, if we try to seek pleasure through the senses, there may be an initial little bit of pleasure that we get, whether it's consumption, whether it's food, sex, drugs, entertainment, whatever it might be that we're trying to use to satisfy our senses with. It tends to wear off quite rapidly. We may get that initial peak, that initial climax of pleasure. But then when we try to go for it again the second time soon after, it just doesn't feel as good. And we tend to feel actually even worse afterward. It's the funniest thing. And this is the reason why a lot of people look towards something that will give them greater satisfaction, greater gratification, something beyond the senses, an experience that will be transcendental. And this is why a lot of us seek meditation, because we've gone the route of indulging in our senses, and it just didn't quite deliver the satisfaction that we feel life has in store. Life is a miracle. Life is a beautiful, wonderful, complex process. And there's a lot of beauty in it, and there's a lot of tragedy in it. But we sense that there's more to life. As meditators, we sense that perhaps this isn't all there is. And this is what's known as the process of awakening. When we awaken at a certain point in our lives, and who knows why we awaken. A lot of times people want to explain things, and I think that we can come up with good explanations, but explanations are merely a product of our own perspectives. They're a product of our own point of view, and a point of view is only one point of view. And if you understand what I mean, you understand that any point of view is not a complete picture. And so, we awaken at a certain point in life, and for, traditionally, it's been explained that this is due to past lives, that this is due to the fact that perhaps there is a part of ourselves that reincarnates from one lifetime to another lifetime. And whether or not you're familiar with the concept of reincarnation, I definitely feel that it's worth looking into. It's worth understanding as a meditator, as someone who's interested in meditation. The concept of reincarnation is something I would recommend researching and looking at. So it's explained that we all have different experience, past experience, in past lives. If you're interested in meditation, self-discovery, higher dimensional experience, higher consciousness, chances are you've done this before. Chances are you've been interested in meditation, chances are you've pursued this practice in past lives. And generally we pick up where we're left off. What would explain the difference in why someone who's born in the same town, goes to the same school, has a very similar upbringing, why they're not interested in something like meditation, self-discovery, moving beyond the norm, as we call it? They're satisfied with all of what culture and society is offering them. And then you have another person born in the same neighborhood, goes to the same school, has a very similar upbringing, and yet at a certain point in life they awaken and they look around and they see that there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be something that knows deeper. There's got to be something that can bring me to a deeper level of experience. So why is there that difference among people? Very similar upbringings, same culture, same society, and yet the one person is interested in meditation and the other person could care less about something like meditation. For me, this explanation comes from reincarnation. The fact that we are drawn back to the pursuit and practice of self-discovery is an indicator that you've practiced before. Chances are that you've practiced before in past lives. As fantastic and you know, as that may sound, it seems as if, you know, not only is it talked about in traditional texts, not only is it outlined in, you know, various Buddhist texts, Hindu texts, but it just seems to make sense on a practical, logical level. That what else would explain differences among people? What else would explain the child prodigy that can instantly learn piano and become like a virtuoso by the time he's 4 years old or she's 4 years old, versus the other kid who you know, doesn't do that? Now, sure, parenting has a great deal to do that, but they say in reincarnation that we pick our parents, that we pick our birth parents, people who are, you know, will allow us to have the best experience for our soul's evolution. So, regardless of, you know, the differences, the point is that if you're interested in meditation, chances are the reason why you joined this group is because you're interested in meditation. You're interested in what meditation can offer. And yes, on a base level, it can offer that relief. It can offer that reduction of anxiety, reduction of suffering, reduction of the mental chatter. And it can also offer a pathway to self-discovery, liberation, and ultimately enlightenment, Buddhahood. And, you know, it's okay to start from here and then never go over to here. But if you're someone who's already interested in things like self-discovery, you know, higher consciousness, multidimensional experiences, chances are that you've practiced before. So, with all that said, this is why I come to you, my friends, is because there's a lot of information out there. I come from a tradition of martial arts and Buddhism. I come from a background of a pursuit of self-mastery. You know, I initially got into martial arts when I was 15, not to learn fighting, but to learn to become a master. I knew that through Kung Fu, Chinese martial arts, which I was a big fan of watching Kung Fu movies on TV when I was a kid, that there was something special about the master-student relationship that was missing from my life. And, you know, looking back at it years afterward, I knew that that's because that's the way that I had been in past lives. I had always had a master, and I always sought the teachings. And so you might be similar. And so, you know, originally, you know, martial arts, and then later I learned Buddhism, Taoism, and these other methods of self-discovery that just seemed more real. They seemed more practical. Yeah, I grew up in a Western Christian church-like setting, I never really saw anything in it for me, and I was quick to leave the church as soon as I got my driver's license. I told my parents, I'm like, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry, this is just not something that I feel is for me. And, you know, it was through, being exposed to books. Isn't it amazing sometimes when you go to like a bookstore or a library and there's just a book that just seems to be talking to you. Perfect. It's just sitting there and you pick it up and you read it and you just say yes, 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 yes. It may be completely new. It may be something that you never even thought about, but all of a sudden it's describing exactly your experience that has been had by countless others. And this was my experience when I found a book on Buddhism in my high school library, believe it or not, and I was 18. And the cover attracted me. It was one of these Tibetan tankas, and the cover art was beautiful. It just attracted me for something. It just drew me to it. And I picked a book and I read it, and it was describing experiences that I had already had, that I had no words for prior to that. And it was soon after that I met a teacher. I met a teacher of enlightenment. I met a meditation master, a fully enlightened guru, I guess you could call. And that's a story for another time, but that changed my life. And I studied with this meditation master for a number of years and learned this process, which I'm about to share with you. And this process is a process of single-pointed mind meditation on the chakras. Now, why is this process one that I feel is very helpful? Because whether you're a beginner, whether you're an intermediate, whether you're an advanced meditator, there's something in it for you. And it doesn't really matter where you're starting from. This particular technique kind of delivers all levels in this particular practice. And it starts with the 5 steps to stillness. The 5 steps to stillness is a training method. It's a training method known as single-pointed mind concentration. And it begins with step 1, where we utilize a yantra. The yantra is a device that you focus on with your eyes, and it begins with an open-eyed concentration exercise when we focus with a single-pointed vision on that central dot. What this does is it warms up your concentration ability. So I've got yantras for you guys ready to go. There's a link at the top of the page, of the top of the group, in the announcements section, and it's announcement number 1. And you can just download the yantra and print one out. I like to sit in a chair when I meditate. For me, it's much more comfortable to sit for long periods of time on the edge of a chair. It's really helpful to keep my back straight and keep the spine straight and keep a good posture where, imagine if I was to hold like a book on the top of my head. This is the type of posture we want to keep. Yes. And whether you like to sit in a chair or whether you like to sit on the floor, no problem at all. I put the yantra about 3 feet away from my eye level, taped up on the wall. And if you like to sit on the floor, then you can get a little table that brings the yantra up to eye level and stack some books and just lay it on there, or get one of those frames that has a little stand on it that you can look at the yantra. The yantra is a great, quick way to silence your thoughts, to get the distractions out of the way, to warm up your concentration ability. You could use any object, really, any object of focus. It really doesn't matter what it is. I could use this pen. I could sit here and just stare at the tip of that pen and achieve basically the same process. Now, of course, the Sri Yantra has a number of different geometric lines on it that actually do something to your consciousness. It helps to format your consciousness, and it's very helpful for getting started with your meditation. So I've included that in step 1. And then we get into the bulk of the meditation practice, where we focus on the chakras. The chakras are in your subtle physical body. The subtle physical body is a body of energy, is a body of light that surrounds the physical body. The subtle physical is where the chakras are located. There are many, many chakras. There are many, many channels of energy, similar to the physical body, where we have veins from, our cardiovascular system. We've got nerves from our nervous system. And the subtle body contains many different channels, but one in particular that we're concerned with is called the Sushumna. The Sushumna is the main central channel that runs from approximately where the base of the spine is, all the way up to the forehead right here where the third eye is. And there are 6 chakras that go along the primary meridian on the Sushumna. Then there's a 7th chakra at the crown. Now we deal with 3 primary chakras here in this meditation, beginning first with the navel chakra, then moving on to the heart chakra, and then finishing off with the third eye chakra. The reason for this is because there are 3 primary areas, the lower, middle, and upper area. And this is very similar to how an ant has an abdomen, a thorax, and a head. We ourselves have an abdomen, a thorax, and a head. And if you notice, the organs in those areas are very different. So there's also a symbolic sort of connection with these 3 areas. The lower portion of ourselves and the lower chakras related to that lower portion of ourselves deal with the raw power, deal with the physical dimensions, the dimensions that are closer to the body. Then in the center part, we have the emotional area, the heart chakra. And then we have the wisdom and knowledge center, the third eye, which is also related to seeing energy, seeing non-physical, seeing multidimensional. And so these 3 aspects of ourselves are what make up the totality. These 3 dimensions are very close to us. We have the physical, emotional, and mental. Okay, so these 3 aspects, when balanced, make us more complete, make us less limited. We don't want to be, overly focused in one or another, because that creates an imbalance. Let's say we're just too focused in the navel. We'll be too focused on power. Or let's say we're just too focused on the heart chakra and we don't have any power. We don't have the wisdom and the knowledge from the head center to guide all of that. So these 3 aspects are very important for the complete balance of our entire being. So after these 3 points, we move up into the last step of the meditation, which I refer to as surrender. And in the 5th step, we will surrender to what we have discovered. And what we discover is stillness. Stillness already exists. Stillness is the highest frequency, which is why I have coined this meditation challenge, the 30 days to raise your frequency, because we ourselves need to match the existing frequencies in order to experience them. Right now, your experience, perceptually, is based on your frequency. For most of us, our frequency is tuned to the physical dimension. It's tuned to the 3rd dimension, which is the dimension of physicality. It's the dimension of solidity. It's the dimension of a solid, liquid, gas. Interestingly enough, symbolically, we have the solid, liquid, and gas represented in this trinity that I just talked about here. So, now, so what we are doing here is we are then moving beyond the physical realm. Because we are so locked up in the 3D realm, just due to the fact that this is a condition. This is a conditioned experience. Because we're born into a world that only focuses mostly on the physical. We're born into a world that likes to that likes to relegate emotions as an unnecessary part of life. We're born into a world that tends to say, well, ignore your emotions, focus on the mental activity. And so our emotions are very key to feeling, the ability to feel. And so we're conditioned in a world to focus on our bodies. We're not taught largely that we're multidimensional beings. And, unless we actually once awaken, we pursue the yogic sciences, we pursue meditation, we pursue qigong, or we pursue some type of meditation, energy work. Most of us aren't familiar with the fact, and we're not taught, certainly, the fact that we have these many dimensions to ourselves. And so, for the vast majority of people in this dimension, on this plane of existence, they're mostly stuck and focused on the physical body, on the five senses. And, this is a limitation. This is a limitation of perception. Since we are seeking to move beyond limitation, to expand our perception, this is what this meditation process is doing. We are moving from the senses into the feeling, and then moving beyond with this 5 steps to stillness process. And so what this does is it reawakens our unlimited potential. Our potential and birthright, if you will, to experience our multidimensional selves, to experience the multidimensional perceptual world, which is just as real, if not more real, than the physical world. It's all real. It's all relative. And so, if you seek to move beyond the limitations of the physical, if you seek to move beyond the limitations of experience of life through the senses, then this is what's referred to as transcendence, transcending the limitations of the physical. And we do this in a step-by-step process within this meditation. So what we're doing is we're taking our awareness, we're taking our attention, which is normally locked up in the senses. It's attached to the senses through attachment, through habit, through tendency, through being taught that this is how we look at life. This is how we label a tree. This is how we see a person. You see them and you see a body. You don't see their aura. You don't see their mind. You don't see their thoughts. You don't see their soul and their multidimensional spectrum. We just see the body. Why is that? This is simply due to the fact that our attention is operating through our senses, and our senses are here to help us navigate through the physical world. Now, the senses do have another component, which I'm not going to go into today. They have many different uses that are beyond what we're taught how to use. The eyes, for example, we're just taught to see through the eyes, but we're not familiar with the fact that the eyes are also a way to receive light, like from the sun, for example. Let's not get into that. What we're doing was we're moving our attention from where it's locked up in, where it's attached to in the senses, and we're moving it into awareness. We're moving it beyond the senses, which you could say beyond the body. And we do this initially by feeling. The art of feeling is a lost art. Our ability to feel energy, our ability to feel the chakras is that bridge. When we can feel energy and focus on the chakras, what this is doing is it's bringing our ability to feel, sense, and this is a way that is beyond, it's multidimensional. It's a way to move beyond just the physical experience. And so when we focus on a chakra, we're tuning into our energy bodies, and each chakra on the way up, in an ascending manner, raises the frequency to higher dimensions. Each chakra is related to various different dimensions. And we ourselves are multidimensional beings, so most of us are locked up down in the lower chakras. Most of humanity are locked up in the first 2 chakras. the root and the sex chakra. And you can see where our obsessions are. So, what we start off with is we don't focus on the first two chakras, we focus on the third chakra. This is the navel chakra, just below the belly button. And this is the chakra of power. But it's a higher power. It's like the power of martial arts. Okay? It's very important to have power. Without power, nothing gets turned on. You know, try to flip the switch in your home, and if you want the lights to turn on, there better be some power. There better be some electricity. When I want to turn on my Bluetooth speaker, you know what button I hit? I just love that sound. And that's the power button. So, think of your navel chakra as the power button, and you want to press it. Okay? Then we move up to the heart chakra. And the heart chakra opens us up to a whole other dimension of reality, a whole other dimension of existence. This is a dimension of feeling, of emotion, which is a dimension of where we can feel the full spectrum of feelings. And the heart, the higher heart specifically, is related to love. Self-love, love of all, love of God, love of the universe, love of each other, the feeling of love. We've all felt what it's like to feel in love with something. And so this is a feeling that is actually sourced and emanates from our heart chakra. It's a very beautiful experience when the heart chakra opens. And so this is a part of ourselves which is largely blocked up from our conditioning in our cultures and societies. They don't want to focus on emotions, and so therefore our emotions have become quite secondary. They become quite numb. And for many people this area is very blocked up because most of us have gone through experiences in life where we've been hurt, where we've been abused, where we've been the object of someone's anger and frustration. And the only way to deal with that, and a lot of times, or the way that we have dealt with that, perhaps in a way that we just didn't know any better, was to block up, was to shield, was to close off our heart so that we didn't feel those emotions or that energy being projected at us. So to be open, to be loving, it takes a certain degree of courage in this world. So we move beyond that and we move up to the third eye chakra. And the third eye is the all-seeing eye. Why is it called the all-seeing eye? Because when your third eye is open, the energy, the Kundalini energy, rises up to that point, and it allows you to see multidimensionally, not through the physical eyes, but allows you to see on other planes of existence. You can perhaps see things hundreds of miles away in a different area of the world. You can perhaps see people's past lives. You can see into other people's minds. It makes you very psychic when your third eye is open. Now, these may not necessarily be the goals of your opening the third eye, but we want to always have the complete spectrum of experience. And so when we open the third eye, we're also opening up to a plane of knowledge, of knowing, and a plane of wisdom, which is, wisdom and knowledge are not necessarily synonymous. You can know things, but wisdom has a degree of experience attached to it. It's when you've had not only the knowledge, you gain knowledge from wisdom, but wisdom comes from experience. And so these are the three primary meridians that we focus on in this meditation. And what happens is that the Kundalini energy will rise. Kundalini energy is an energy that usually lies latent, dormant in our root chakra. And this is the energy that animates all of life. For most folks, the Kundalini is very, very locked up. It's very inaccessible and lies dormant. And the Kundalini is really the energy that awakens us spiritually. When we have a spiritual experience that awakens us to a new perception, that brings us to a higher plateau of higher consciousness. Generally, this is related to a Kundalini arousal. Whether this arousal was spontaneous or whether this arousal was stimulated by some substance or event, or perhaps just it was its time, Oftentimes the Kundalini will rise in various individuals, and in others it lies dormant for their whole lives. And again, this harkens back to what I was originally talking about with your experience in reincarnation. And so it's a good thing to raise the Kundalini, because it's a good thing to have all of your lights on. Without all of your lights on, you can't really see much. And we as human beings have many different levels, layers, and dimensions to our being that for most people are inaccessible. For most people they are just unknown, or they're dormant because there's no energy flowing there. So what we seek to do is we seek to reawaken and raise that Kundalini. Now when we're focusing on a chakra, we don't do anything except feel. There's no forcing. There's simply bringing our awareness and feeling that area. Like right now, when I bring my awareness to my heart center, my heart chakra, I can feel that there's a subtle energy there. And what happens is if I focus on that, if I just feel it with subtle, calm awareness, there's no brute force, there's no necessarily like, you don't have to push it necessarily. You just feel it with a subtle awareness. What happens is the Kundalini will automatically rise up to that point at a certain point when it's awakened, when the heart chakra begins to open. What makes it open is the Kundalini energy. Now initially we bring our attention to that point, we bring our awareness to that point. And where our awareness is, where we place our attention, energy will follow, energy will collect. And then when the chakra begins to activate, when it begins to open, it's very much like a flower, in that most of the time our chakras are dormant. They're like buds of a flower. But when they begin to open, like most flowers are beginning to do right now in springtime, because there's more Kundalini energy coming from Earth, these chakras begin to open like flowers. And this is where the symbolic lotus petals, flowers of the chakras come from, because they're very much like chakra. The word chakra actually means wheel. And the chakras are the places in our subtle physical body where a lot of these energy channels join. We've got the main central channel, then we have many different other channels. The nadis, they're referred to. And the chakras are places like vortexes of energy. Just like there are vortexes of energy on the earth has chakras. These vortexes of energy are where the earth vibrates at a higher frequency, and we can experience multidimensional experiences much more easily on these areas. These chakras of the earth are also known as power places, and there's many of these vortexes and power places in places like Sedona, Arizona, certain sacred mountains where the earth vibrates at a higher frequency. You can go to these places. People take pilgrimages to these places to have multidimensional experiences, because it's much easier to touch other dimensions in these areas, just as it's much easier to access higher dimensions when our chakras are open and our Kundalini is elevated, is risen. Okay, so then we enter into the fifth step of the 5 steps to stillness. And in the fifth step, what we're seeking to do is release ourselves from any kind of concentration. In the fifth step, we are merely letting go. We are surrendering to the consciousness. Now, consciousness is already existing. Consciousness is eternal. It's ever present. It's the essence, substance, and creator of all things. Consciousness is just a word we use for the intelligent mind of life. It has to be consciousness. Consciousness is prior to all things. Without consciousness, you can't be conscious. So we seek to move beyond the concentration and release ourselves into consciousness. So in the fifth step, it's a letting go. It's a surrendering. It's a surrendering of control, because it's this control that we've initially sought to master, by focusing with a single point on the chakras. And then we seek to let that go and just allow the universe, which is much more intelligent than our own little separate brain, the mind of the universe is something that we can have faith in, we can trust, we can surrender to it, knowing that it lovingly will do what it needs to do, and then we will safely return back to our concentrated form. And oftentimes when we return to our bodies, when we return to our senses after being beyond them, there's a sense of renewal. There's a sense of being reborn. There's a sense of newness to life because we've been beyond the norm. We've been beyond what we're used to. And eventually, when we master the process of meditation, when we master the process of transcendence, we will have an experience of continual illuminosity. The illumined one, light, is one that has the Kundalini all the way up, and the crown chakra, which is the 1,000-petal lotus of light, it actually opens, and we have a connection with the divine. The divine is actually what is present through an illumined one, someone who has gone beyond and is fully awake, fully conscious of all dimensions, beyond all dimensions. And so, yeah, that's what it's all about. So, join me in a guided meditation. I'm going to walk you through the 5 steps to stillness. And let's get it started. Now, we're doing this 5 steps to music right now. I also like to do this meditation to silence. And I feel that when we do it to silence, it tends to have a little bit deeper experience. But during these 30 days to raise your frequency, I wanted to make it very easily accessible to everyone, and so I've added the music. And this is going to be 5 songs for 1 song per step. So when we begin by focusing on the yantra. Hopefully at this point you've got a yantra printed out and put up on your wall. If you haven't, just listen to the music for the first step, or just watch the video. What I'm going to be doing is focusing on that central dot of the yantra for step 1 in an effort to bridge my attention from the usual wandering, scattered, mode that it's in, to a single point of focus that I try to hold perfectly still on that central dot. Breathe naturally throughout this entire meditation. Relax, but keep a good posture. And begin by focusing on that central dot of the yantra. When thoughts or distractions come in and out of your mind, just ignore them and try to hold steady. Now that we've warmed up our concentration, we'll move inward toward feeling the chakras. Close the eyes gently. We're going to begin a process of feeling deeply, feeling the energy of the chakras. Let's begin with the navel chakra. For step 2, we'll take the fingertip and place it gently. About an inch or two below the navel, below the belly button, is the physical area corresponding to where the navel chakra is located in the energy body. Place the fingertip about an inch or two below the belly button and press gently into that spot. Feel that gentle pressure that the finger is making on that spot. Hold your awareness, hold your attention on that spot and feel. Again, breathe naturally, and when thoughts come in and out of the mind, simply ignore them and try to hold your attention, hold your ability to feel very steady and still on that navel chakra. You may feel a bit of heat, which is a good sign that the chakra is beginning to activate, beginning to open. Once you've locked in with your feeling on that spot, you can remove the finger and continue to hold your attention on feeling that navel chakra. Now move your attention up to the heart chakra. Place the fingertips at the center of the chest. This will prompt your attention or your awareness to feel in that spot. Once you've locked onto that spot, you can remove your fingers and continue to hold your awareness, hold your attention on feeling the heart chakra. Now move your attention up to the third eye. Place the fingertip between the eyebrows and slightly above. Press gently into the forehead and feel that spot. Once you've locked onto that spot with your attention, you can remove your finger. Continue to hold your attention on that spot, on feeling that spot, without waver, perfectly still. Now let go of all control, of all concentration. Release all tension in your body, in your nervous system, in your emotions, and in your mind. Simply surrender to the stillness. slowly return back to your body. That was a good, nice, peaceful, still meditation. It's important after you meditate to not just rush back into your regular activities, but take a moment. Take a moment to settle in, to observe the changes that may have occurred, to observe the alteration in your perception, to observe the newness, as I like to call it, that you may be experiencing. And then we try to maintain this stillness, to maintain this mindfulness throughout the day. And through the practice of meditation, we become more and more still. We become more and more familiar with these realms of stillness, of light, of peace, of transcendence, of tranquility. And then this begins to carry over into our lives, more and more so. The deeper we get, the more we practice, the more frequently we practice. Well, there you have it, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today on this long video. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you watching. And we'll be back tomorrow in the video for day 27 already. So we got 3 more days of the 30 days to raise your frequency. After that, I'll be launching my spiritual community called Concentration to Consciousness, and it will be a group coaching program for those of you who wish to take the 5 steps to stillness to a deeper, more profound level of stillness. And I'll be sharing with members shortly how to enroll in that program and what it's all about. So stay tuned for that. Launches May 1st, Concentration to Consciousness, and let's look forward to that. Alright guys, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one, and have a great day. Take care.